Hey everyone, welcome back. We're here for a great session. I'm Joe McKendrick, analyst and contributor with Database Trends Applications, the publication that is helping to host this event. And I am pleased to have a working data scientist here with us to talk to you about really cool things: segmentation, behavioral analysis, right? Location data.
All those things.
All those things. Okay, Ali Rossi, Senior Data Scientist with Foursquare. Ali, take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Joe. Can you all hear me on this lavalier mic? Can I get up? A little quiet? Is there a way to make me a little louder? Pump it up a little, that's good? All right, awesome, thank you everyone. I'm excited to be here. As Joe said, I'm Ali Rossi. I'm a Senior Data Scientist and Tech Lead at Foursquare, which does this mean louder or good? Oh, okay. Louder. I'll try to speak louder. I'm not a very loud person, but if we could get the sound up a little. Okay, thank you. So I work at Foursquare. It's a location intelligence company. And today I'm going to talk about a project that I worked on to uncover consumer segments based on their behaviors. And that was by applying unsupervised learning to location data.
Sorry, I think the white that, and I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that's working is the one that's on the stand.
Oh,
So
well,
now, I don't know. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
is Bill here? Okay, I guess I could talk into this. Is this one working? I can just use that. Let me turn off this one. Thank you, though. I would love for you guys to hear me, so I appreciate that. All right, I will be stuck at the podium. It's like a presidential address. All right, so does this sound good? I'll try to stick at this volume. Thank you, everyone. So a little bit about me. I've been at Foursquare for 5 years. I work on our mobile location panel, which is multi-millions of consumers, where we get to see everywhere they go, which is really fascinating to me. Throughout my career, I've worked in insights mostly, so it's really cool to be able to use this location data to help our customers, which are CPG, retail, restaurants, and others, sort of understand how people move around the world. Before data science, I was a product manager. That was kind of a rough time in my life. I found data science fits me a bit better, but I worked at my current company, at Amazon and at Nielsen as a PM, working mainly on insights products that were using consumer source data. So this is kind of my favorite space to be in. And I'm actually working on a master's in computer science, specializing in machine learning, and should be graduating in December, which is pretty exciting. So today I'm going to talk about a project that kind of highlights the power of collaboration within the R&D org. So I sort of took my team's thinking, which is we're the insights business, and applied it to another business of Foursquare, which is Foursquare's audience product for marketers. So first I'm going to explain what is location data, how do we collect it, and how do we translate it into actionable insights for these marketers about where people go in the real world. From there, I'm going to talk briefly about the audience product and just a challenge that we found with that, and how we collaborated with the audience team to use unsupervised learning to apply that to location data in order to make a smarter audience offering. And then I'm going to share with you our findings, the 6 segments that we obtained around holiday shopping, and how marketers could use that to drive impact. So first, I want to give you guys a grounding, I have to stay right up to the mic, give you a grounding in location data and how it's collected. So our location capabilities are driven by 2 kind of core technologies, movement and places. So starting with movement, Foursquare started as a consumer app. For anyone of my age group or older, maybe you remember it from 2012. It was sort of a check-in app. Actually still exists, but we invented the social media check-in, which some other companies kind of took that feature and ran with it. But from that use case of us coming up with that, we got really good at determining from the signals coming from the mobile phone, so latitude, longitude, Bluetooth connection, Wi-Fi networks that you're connected to, even time of day and other features like that, determining exactly where people are in the world. And so we use that to power partner apps. For example, like a gas app that tells you where all the best gas prices are. They need location to be able to drive those types of features, to tell you the gas stations around you and the user-sourced pricing for those. So for those users that opt into sharing background location with us, we're able to derive visits. So it's to the tune of actually 9 billion global visits per month from 500 million devices. And the other piece of the puzzle is our places data. So it's a global POI, or place of interest database, of 120 million plus venues. And the problem is that venues are constantly opening and closing across the world. So it's a really interesting problem to keep that data set up to date. And so we have ML models and human verification that are used to keep that up to date. So together, movement and places help us kind of deeply understand how people move through the world. The secret sauce is really coming from us translating those raw signals, into meaningful data about the places people go and how they move between them. We actually started in New York City, where I live, which makes it, made us so good at this problem because it's very densely packed. Retail and residences are all very close to each other, and New York was built upwards. So having to determine, based on these phone signals, is someone at CVS, shopping for toilet paper, or are they next door at the bar or upstairs at the hair salon, is kind of a complicated problem. So as a result of 15 years of unique data collection from Foursquare, we created a map of the world, which is not based on coordinates, but the actual places or venues. So I'm going to talk about my world within Foursquare pretty briefly, which is called Insights, the Insights business. My role for several years, I worked on kind of custom analytics studies for our customers, retailers, CPG, restaurants, but also our partner apps as well, to help them understand a lot of things about their business, their customers and visitors, where else they go, their sorts of profiles based on location data. Also creating sales enablement, doing PR, getting to work with some really great publications with this information as well. The last year or so, we've been working on productizing this offering, so letting customers actually access these insights through a tool. Oops. So you can see some of the types of areas that we answer here. So loyalty, who are my most loyal customers? Where else do they go? Sort of what is their profile? Is there seasonality in my business? And as a marketer, should I focus my marketing efforts on a certain time of year? Who is my competitive set? Rather, not just who you think your competitive set is, but what other businesses are your customers going to within the same category, so we can kind of get your true competitive set. Site selection, if you want to open a new restaurant, for example, where is the foot traffic coming of the types of consumers that would visit your restaurant, and also how do you avoid cannibalization of your other sites? And also things like macroeconomic impacts on your business. We did a lot of work during the height of the pandemic to see, where across the country, what kinds of categories recovery was happening in, what types of demographics, versus where was recovery happening a bit more slowly. So before I get into the project, I want to talk to you about the second piece of the project, the audience business for Foursquare. I want to highlight an opportunity that we saw there. So my team, actually, Insights team, doesn't really work with this group. I didn't actually know a lot about this product before we got involved with it, but we had an idea to marry Insights and audience. So I'll give you a quick background on what audience is. It's a pretty big business of my company. It comprises targeted audience segments based on consumers' real visitation within the real world. And it actually lets marketers reach their target consumers within all kinds of channels, so digital and social, but also out of home, connected TV, et cetera. Some of the use cases for audience are, for example, winning back your lapsed consumers. So maybe they visited your store in the past and you want to retarget them. That's one potential use case. You can also use it to acquire new customers. You can see who's actually in market and reach them during kind of the buying cycle when they might be ready to buy. You can also see who visited a competitive store recently and target them to try to regain some market share. And also staying top of mind, increasing retention by retargeting consumers. So Foursquare offers in a few different flavors of accessing segments. So there's over 1,000 ready-to-use audiences. They tend to be a little more generic because they're things that a lot of people may want to use. So specific brand or category visitors, like someone who visited CVS, brand loyalists, people who live near certain businesses, certain demographics, or lifestyles like work-from-home millennials. But what you see on the screen here is some of the things that you can use to build a custom audience. So there's a tool where marketers can go in and get very targeted and very specific to an audience that they want to reach for their campaign. And they can use kind of all of these different levers and combine them. For example, moms who live near Target is something you could create on your own. Starbucks visitors in the last 30 days, or lapsed gas station visitors. So this is really great for letting customers determine exactly who they want to target. But what if they don't know who to target, who is the most important? Can we let them understand what aspects of the data are most meaningful? So this is where my business area insights comes in. We were able to take some methods and some learnings from insights into the audience sphere. We ended up testing this out on holiday shoppers. Retail is a really big vertical for us, and the holiday shopping time is like big opportunity, big money. Marketers start making their plans very early in the year for this. And what we realized is these ready-to-use segments are pretty generic, but the custom segments, building your custom audience requires you to know exactly who to target and what's important. So instead, we brought kind of an aspect of our analytics insights practice, and we took unsupervised learning, and we allowed the data to tell us which discrete shopper segments were important. And then another thing we borrowed from insights was once we had these segments, we ran our kind of standard insights reports against them, and were able to build a custom profile of these shoppers so that marketers could get a full picture of who they were and why they were important. Oops. Sorry, this computer is very, All right, so the way this project came about, I'd love to say that I envisioned it from the start. It actually was a fun hackathon project within, my insights business, and our stakeholder recognized pretty quickly that, she could take her sort of customer insight. She had more knowledge of the go-to-market team, of all of our products, and of our customers. And she helped us really tweak this concept into something that would be valuable. I just thought, we'll run some insights reports about these segments and publish a blog post. And she said, marketers are going to want to target these people. If you come up with these segments, that's the next step they're going to ask us for. So I think it kind of speaks to collaboration and company culture there, that they encourage creativity within my org. I had this hackathon idea. They encourage collaboration of, my stakeholder saying, this idea might be something, let's take it. And she introduced us to the go-to-market team, to audience, and made it happen. She helped collaborate on the positioning about them being data-driven holiday segments. So it was a really good story of kind of taking an idea and being able to collaborate to launch something really cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the methodology now. And first, I mentioned unsupervised learning several times, so quick primer on that. It refers to identifying patterns in data without the use of labels, so without explicit guidance, not having labels of the target variables, which is different from supervised learning, another flavor of machine learning, which is where you would use labels on the target variables. There's a wide range of applications, clustering obviously, but also anomaly detection, dimensionality reduction. But I think it works really well for behavioral segmentation, which is grouping individuals based on shared characteristics or behavior patterns. And from there, marketers can gain insight on the behavior of different customers and better target their marketing efforts. So we explained this concept to our insights stakeholder, and she loved it. She said, I think there's something here with calling them the data-driven segments. And I'll show you the collateral we came up with later, but basically positioning this as, we will tell you what's important in the data. Let's let the data speak. And it ended up being a very powerful positioning and actually kind of bringing the data science methodology to the forefront and explaining it to customers, to marketers in a way that they could understand. So I'm going to talk briefly about the methodology that we used and then get into the findings and the profiles of the 6 different segments. So these are the high-level steps of the methodology. There's definitely a lot of iteration throughout to find the best way to create the feature set, to find the best algorithms to use that were getting us some good results. But the basic results, the basic steps are, I took our location data and created some meaningful features off of them, and then did some standardization of the features to make them work better within the k-means algorithm that we used. I used dimensionality reduction, and we'll talk about that on a few slides about why we do that. But again, it's about being able to feed the best version of the data into the clustering algorithm to get the best results. And then I used weighted k-means to create our clusters. And from there, we ran some insights around these segments to kind of build out a broader profile, and then made them available as targeting segments so that marketers could purchase these. So starting with the feature set, our location data consists of visits that are made by users to venues. So we needed to turn that into something that could be put into the k-means algorithm. So we collaborated with our stakeholder who knows the marketer, speaks to the customers a lot, and we talked about what are the features that would really differentiate holiday shoppers and be meaningful to marketers. So we do have some predicted demographics of our users. So we use their predicted age, percent likelihood to be female, predicted income bucket, and home zip code population density. And then the behavioral features were where it got really fun. So we thought the number of visits during the holiday shopping period to a retail store, any retail store, we thought that could be pretty important. And we did see that that ended up separating people a lot. And we know that marketers are probably going to want to target the people who are making a lot of visits. We also thought about the different segments of retail, so clothing stores, shopping malls. Those types of visitors are going to be different probably than discount stores, big box stores, et cetera. And then some of the temporal aspects, so who is more of a Black Friday shopper? What percent of visits to retail during holiday season were on Black Friday versus the more last-minute shoppers, like people shopping the Saturday right before Christmas. We also ended up seeing a lot of differentiation between weekend and weekday shoppers. So to get that into a feature that actually could feed into k-means, we did percent of visits that were on the weekend during the holiday shopping period. And then there's a few other metrics that we use in Insights. So average number of minutes spent in a retail store, we call that dwell time. And then distance traveled, so the median distance during holiday shopping season that people travel to get to the store. So from there, we had to do some feature engineering. K-means is an algorithm that groups points into clusters based on distance. So it's really important for all features to be on the same scale, because otherwise one feature might have outsized impact on the training of the model, while others, which might be important, may not actually have impact. So we ended up testing a lot of methods, but bucketing into quantiles, so 5 equally sized buckets, ended up being the best technique that got us the best results. And we actually found that the audience team, this is how they create segments usually. They use sort of like a high, medium, low visitation bucketing. So we were kind of lucky to end up with the same methodology in the end. This bucketing is also going to help in a lot of ways. So removing kind of the impact of outliers. We saw some of our panelists had like really high visitation, and we didn't want them to kind of skew things. So that just ended up having them in, the very high bucket. Another aspect of k-means is that, you're looking at distance between points within your feature space. And so the more features you have, the more dimensions. And so we had 16 features. The more dimensions you have, the further the distance away, because you're thinking now of a 16D visualization, which we can't think of, or at least I can't. But the distances will be further away in 16 dimensions versus 10 dimensions or 3 dimensions. So that requires you to have more samples, which is not good. So generally for clustering, you want to reduce your dimensionality. So we used a technique called principal component analysis, or PCA, which it actually creates a new feature set off of your original feature set that's a linear combination of your original feature set. And they're actually sorted in order of the variance that they explain in your data. So the chart I have on the bottom there is a cumulative explained variance of the 16 principal components, which are kind of our new features. And so you can decide to just cut it off at a certain point. So we just took the top 10 principal components that explained 80% of variance. And now we have 10 features. The only problem is that explainability definitely suffers, because now we have principal component 1, principal component 2, instead of retail visits, percent of weekend shopping. So that's something that we had to address later in the project, but this made a very good input into our k-means. So once we have our dimensionally reduced feature set, we can train our k-means algorithm, and it's an optimization algorithm. So it's iteratively trying to maximize the distance between our clusters. We want a lot of separation, but it's also trying to minimize the distance between points within the same cluster. And so k-means can tell us kind of where the insights live within the data with minimal human direction. So we ended up with 6 clusters. I won't speak about how we decided on 6, but there was some mathematical and kind of, customer reasons for that. And so then I created a 3D plot there. We have 10 dimensions, but again, I can only see in 3D. So I took the first 3 principal components, and we can see really nice separation there. And then there's a distribution plot on the right side, so showing the distribution for each cluster across each principal component. And I kind of saw that as you get down to the further principal components near the bottom, there's not a lot of separation. We probably didn't even need this many features. We probably could have cut it down even more. So this comes back to the problem of this feature set that's not very explainable. So if I showed this to my stakeholder and said, well, the green cluster is really low on principal component 1, and the orange cluster is really, has low values for principal component 2, that is not meaningful to a customer, to internal people. This is data science language, and we've got to get it into sort of more customer language. So we looked at it this way just to see, did we get good separation? But from there, we joined our cluster definitions back on the original feature set. And you can see my 3D plot now, a little more spread out, but again, still separation. I only chose 3 of our features, so I think I have on there retail visits, percent likelihood to be female, and weekend percent. So again, we have many more features in the data set, but just wanted to see how they separated here because these were pretty important ones. The left chart is showing a random forest feature importance chart, because again, I wanted to start to understand what is the differentiation between these segments. And this sort of shows what features are the most impactful in defining a given cluster or segment. So the one with the really high bars on the right is the percent of weekend visits, and there's 2 clusters that are really highly defined by that. So that ended up being our weekend driver, which makes a lot of visits on the weekend, and they travel long distances, so we imagine them driving around to different stores on the weekend. And then the weekday browser, which tended to be an older audience, they shop early in the day, on the weekdays. So those two were very defined by that. Another interesting insight here was, if you probably can't see, but for retail visits per user, that was actually meaningful for all of the segments, as we had kind of predicted, when we were creating our feature set. So we next dove down to look at just the means of each feature by each cluster, just to start to try to understand these clusters more, give them some names before we ran kind of the full insights reports on them. So you don't have to stare at these charts too much, because I'll go through a profile of each of the clusters after this, but this is kind of how we got started on showing this to our stakeholder and saying, do you see something here? Like, these are the differences that we see. Are these some profiles that could be valuable to marketers? So getting into the results, we ended up with our 6 distinct holiday shopper segments. We ran a lot of our standard insights reports against each segment so we can understand all the ways of their shopping, where else they go, kind of bringing them to life. And as I mentioned, our stakeholder helped us partner with go-to-market and really get them excited about this and talk about the benefits, and with the audience team to actually make this a product that marketers could click on a segment and decide to target with them. So we created this collateral together, and I love seeing data science actually on marketing collateral. We called them the data-driven audiences, with the story being that this is the first offering that allows marketers to let the data tell them what was important and what's the most meaningful for holiday shopping. So this project was a few years ago, but we refreshed it, hence why I wanted to share this with you guys today. So in the 2022 holiday season, we launched this a little late. I didn't know that marketers are doing their buys very early for holiday shopping. We were just enjoying our hackathon project and, trying to make it into a thing. But in 2022, we did still end up getting one beta client to use these, which was really cool. And they reported that they got the same or better ROI than using the off-the-shelf segments. So last year, we re-offered this again and had a lot more customers use it, which is super cool. We also reran the insights on them to see what kind of changes have happened. I did retrain the K-means algorithm to see if there were any major changes, but we saw that these segments are still getting the same differentiation. Some of their behaviors have changed, but a lot of the behaviors change in a similar way. So we're seeing kind of the squeeze of inflation, of the cost of living rise. We see some of the behaviors in the real world have changed, with people kind of adjusting for more budget-friendly things, which is really interesting. But the segments are still kind of showing the same types of profiles. So I'm going to go quickly and just go through each of the 6 segments so you can kind of get a feel. So the expert shopper is kind of amazing. I relate a little bit. They have the highest retail visitation frequency during the holiday shopping season, and also to every single one of those retail categories that we looked at, they are higher than all of the other segments. We can, also look, like I mentioned, beyond the feature set that we defined and see some other interesting insights, such as where else they're going and where they're more likely to go than other Americans. So in terms of retail, they're more likely to go to Nordstrom, H&M, Apple, Westfield, and TJ Maxx, so showing they kind of do shop across all kinds of outlets. But in 2023, we're seeing a bit more of these more budget-friendly retailers like TJ Maxx, which is interesting. The weekend driver I mentioned, they have the largest share of weekend holiday retail visitation, and we saw that they also traveled further to retail, so we imagine them kind of driving around on the weekend, hitting up this repertoire of stores. They tend to be older, male, and wealthy, but since 2021, their average income actually has gone down, as I mentioned. They also travel at the holidays. They have more likelihood to go to airports, but in 2023, more likely, it looks like, to do more budget-friendly things like a road trip, judging by them going to Love's travel stops, BP, and rental car locations. they still like kind of some of the finer things like dining, steakhouses, seafood restaurants, but now they've been going to more budget-friendly places like sports bars, wine stores, maybe drinking some wine at home, campgrounds, and lakes. So the suburban spender, they're actually the most affluent of the bunch, but their income has also gone down too. They tend to live in the suburbs, but we saw, since we did the study, some of them have moved to rural areas as well. Like the expert shopper, they make a lot of visits to retail and to most of the retail verticals, but just not at the level of the expert shopper. And it's a trend that we saw across most of the segments that clothing stores and department stores are being visited less. They're more likely to visit Lowe's and Home Goods, but more recently, JCPenney, Hobby Lobby, and Macy's. And another nod to like the budget friendliness, they're really big on Disney during the holidays, but now it's actually less so in 2023. And Disney is very expensive, so that makes sense. And as a contrast to the suburban spender, the urban light shopper lives in urban areas, and they have the lowest retail visits per user. So as you might expect from an urban dweller, I live in New York, similar metro stations, laundromats, CVS. We do a lot of our shopping just in drugstores and bodegas and things like that. They also visit universities, so college students as well. But we have seen in 2023, they may have entered the job force because we're seeing visits to offices, to co-working spaces as well. And maybe they grew up a little bit in terms of their purchasing, so they were visiting more convenience stores before. Now they're a bit bigger on grocery stores like Whole Foods, Safeway, and Trader Joe's. They're also visiting more big box, and they're visiting fast food as well. Then the rural value shopper, so more likely to live in rural regions. And they are kind of the biggest on discount stores, even more so lately, and big box as well. They're also visiting flea markets and thrift stores, and are pretty outdoorsy, as you could expect from living in a rural region. They're going to campgrounds, lakes, and state parks. And then lastly, the weekday browser that I mentioned, they tend to be a bit older. And it's really interesting, 84% of their retail visitation during holiday season is during the week. And they're mainly visiting earlier in the day. They used to visit a lot of fast food. They still do, but it's gone down a bit, potentially replaced by convenience stores. And, although they're a bit older, they're still going out there and enjoying entertainment. Their choices have changed since 2021, though. There's fewer golf courses, but more of the pubs and breweries. So that's what I have for you today about my 6 holiday segments. Really appreciate getting to share this story with you all, and just some quick takeaways. So first, unsupervised learning is a really good tool in your toolkit to unlock the insights that are hiding in your data. So instead of having humans curate the data, unsupervised learning can do the job for you for some use cases, but it does take, some human input early on and kind of that expert knowledge to then let the algorithm do its thing. I think also, hopefully I highlighted some of the importances of having that innovation culture, so encouraging creativity, encouraging ownership and collaboration and relationships within the org, because without all of those things, this, product wouldn't have come about, which is really something that, ended up driving value for audience and kind of combining the best aspects of our business units. And then lastly, I think for a data science project, it's always important to mention, always have to think of your end user and use case. At the start, I was just having fun with our data, but it would have just stayed as that if we hadn't then, manipulated it into a thing that would be something marketers would want to purchase and that would drive value for them. Awesome. So thank you so much, everyone, for your attention, for dealing with the mic issues. Feel free to reach out. That's my LinkedIn code there. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you. And any questions? Oh, yes.
Yeah, I like the presentation and your working with like K-means. I had experience with that. One question I was having
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the question was about why are we using predicted demographics to feed into the model? The answer for that is Foursquare still has a very small presence of a social media app where we do have user-provided demographics if they provide that at sign-up. But for the most part, most of our data is just coming in from mobile, where we don't have a sense of their demographics. They're not user-defined. So it's actually another team, our user data team at Foursquare, but they have models that predict demographics based on visitation. And so that's basically all we have. They do train it on the provided demographics that we have from the social media app. But otherwise, for our broader panel, all we have are predicted demographics. So I then use them as an input into this model. And we do use them for a lot of cases across the company. So on Insights, we use our predicted demographics to report, what's the trend in visits for certain age groups, genders, incomes, things like that. What's the share of visits by income? So they're kind of broadly used across the org.
And the second question I was thinking was like, did you go any feature that was defining the low income, just like the population and demographics is available and categorizing that one into the data collection process and adding in the key needs as well?
And sorry, the question is, did we use income as a feature?
Income is there, but it's like based on the low income category. And did you get any insight of that how many shoppers or which are the targeted folks are going here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the income that we have, it's again a prediction. And so there's 4 buckets. I believe it's under 25K, 25 to 50, 50 to 100, and 100 plus. So that's what we fed in. And then it was definitely the urban light shopper and the rural, oh my God, I can't remember our names now. They're so basic too. The rural value shopper, who are both kind of lower on the income scale. So we did see that income ended up being a differentiator, especially for those segments. And then I mentioned there were the 2 kind of wealthier segments of the suburban spender and the weekend driver, who were kind of on the higher income side. So we definitely did see that split. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned most of it's going to mobile, so I'm wondering, does it all come from one source? Is it all keyed on the same thing? Like, how do you acquire the data? I guess, how do you, if it's coming from multiple sources, how do you do the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, we're working with first and second party data in our Insights org. Third party data is being used in other parts, and we're working on integrating that into Insights. It's a hard problem, though, because that data is more sparse. But the first party data is from our social media apps. And again, I said it's a smaller footprint now, but it's used to train our models. And so it's users of the app who allow always on background location. And we're always very specific with consumer privacy, telling consumers what their data is used for and having them opt in. So that's the first party data. The second party is we have an SDK for our location intelligence algorithms that I spoke about a little bit, but we have kind of developed those over the years to originally to power our consumer app. So basically it takes in the signals from the phone. First it detects whether or not there's a stop because the background location is on. So, you're walking or you're driving, and it determines, did you just pass by a place or did you stop? And then the next piece is returning candidates and probabilities of what that place is. So we license that technology as an SDK to partner apps where they want to enable location-based features for their users, again, as an opt-in. So I mentioned like the gas price app. If a user opts in, that way they can see what are the gas stations around me and what are the prices. So we have an agreement with several of those apps to then get that visitation data back. So our data is coming from kind of a wide variety of different apps. And then I won't even talk about the third-party space since that wasn't involved in this project, but that's something we're actively working on, which, again, many sources. Thank you. Anyone else?
Were you able to automate any of the steps in this process, like the feature engineering and the reduction, K-needs clustering? Were you able to automate the flow from one step to another?
That's a great point. So I guess this was run as more of like an analytics ad hoc project rather than a pipeline because, we've found that we don't have to constantly retrain this model. I think if we were able to expand this product a bit, because we have talked about going beyond holiday and having other occasions or maybe doing a vertical based one, I think that would be a case for us to productionize it. But I will say it was really me and my Databricks notebook for most of it. Good question. Anyone else? These are great questions. Joe. Oh, all set. All right, thanks everyone so much. Appreciate it.